Right, we got episode 6 of Q&A and we got Egyptian pharaoh. Now, first of all, I do apologize. I know I sound like I'm a bit ill, right? But it's just because of like the weather sickness and like the pollen in the air, right? But anyways, she asks, how does one regulate dopamine and get it from healthier sources? Because I've struggled to do so since cheap dopamine like phones are way easier to achieve. Trying to achieve that healthy dopamine feels harder. Now, this is a great question because this is something I can relate to personally, right? You know, I've talked about this a lot, but I was addicted to video games and porn and you know, social media and junk food and all these, you know, activities, right? And all these bad habits. I was addicted to them for years. Like even pornography, I was addicted to it for 7 years, right? Now I overcame all those bad habits and I stopped doing them, right? But dopamine, let's talk about dopamine. Now, what is dopamine? Dopamine is the hormone that motivates us to do good things, that motivates us to do pleasurable things, to do things that feel good. It's the feel-good hormone, right? Now, what happens is, and this is what I learned from people like Andrew Huberman and Anna Lemke, right? Is we have a baseline level of dopamine. And this is what you're talking about here, right? How does one regulate dopamine? Like we have a baseline level of dopamine. And what happens is when we do something that's very pleasurable and feels very good, like pornography or video games or junk food, right? Our dopamine spikes to levels that are very, very, very high, right? Like way, way higher than baseline, right? Like way higher than how you currently feel. But then right after we stop doing that pleasurable activity, our baseline level of dopamine drops. So you feel less happy, you feel less pleasure, you feel like your life is a bit worse, right? Because you spiked your dopamine to this very, very high level. So your body has to maintain homeostasis. It has to stay normal, right? It can't be in any extreme, right? It can be like in very, very high pleasure or very, very high pain. So it has to do this pleasure-pain balance, right? Pleasure-pain balance. It has to do that to maintain homeostasis, right? It's a first principle of biology. Now, what happens is when we do something that's very pleasurable and our dopamine goes very, very high, way higher above baseline and then drops below baseline, we tend to experience a form of pain. We tend to have, you know, terrible sleep, you know, you feel anxious, you feel depressed, you feel irritable, you feel angry, you have these like withdrawal symptoms, right? When you stop doing that thing or after you do that pleasurable thing, right? But the thing is, when we feel those withdrawal symptoms, we do that thing again, and then our dopamine spikes up again, way higher above baseline, but then it drops even lower below baseline, and then you have this thing that you keep going up and down, up and down, up and down, and that's actually what you call here cheap dopamine. Like it's exactly that. It's cheap dopamine because it's instant gratification. You instantly just feel all this pleasure, you just feel amazing, right? But then you just feel terrible. Like the good dopamine, the expensive dopamine, is what you get after you do something that's painful. It's delayed gratification. So it's like when you lift weights, for example, like when you go to the gym and you lift weights, it's pretty painful to lift weights, right? You're physically tearing down your muscles. But after you do that, you feel very, very good. You feel a lot of pleasure. You feel very good, right? Because your dopamine, you get healthy dopamine. Like you have this dopamine increase from doing something that's painful. And that's the good dopamine. That's the dopamine that we actually need. Now, how does one regulate dopamine and get it from healthier sources, right? And this is why I really like this question is, I think what you mean is, like now that we've understood how addiction works, is how do we keep our baseline level of dopamine, how do we increase that and we keep that very high so that our day-to-day life is already just amazing. It's just already like so beautiful and so good and just amazing, right? That you don't need any of these bad habits and all this cheap dopamine, and you don't need to be on your phone or playing video games or eating junk food or watching porn or doing any of these bad habits, right? Because you already have good mental health, you already meditate, you already journal, you already, you know, maybe go to the gym, maybe do yoga, right? You already do all these good habits, right? So how do we do that? Now, what I learned from Andrew Huberman, right, is the way we make our baseline level of dopamine very high is through two things, right? It's through, first of all, a dopamine fast and good habits. So let me explain those. So the first thing, a dopamine fast, basically the only way really to have healthy baseline levels of dopamine and to stop doing all these bad habits like being on our phones or video games or any of these, right, is to do something called a dopamine fast. Now what that means is we just stop doing that bad habit for 1 month or a couple of months, right? We do it for a long period of time. And what's gonna happen is, you know, let's say you want to stop being on your phone, on social media, right? You want to stop being on social media. What's gonna happen is, you know, you delete all the apps, right? You know, I don't have any social media, I don't know, like Snapchat and Facebook, you delete all of them, right? And what happens is you delete them, and the thing is, the first couple of days, your baseline level of dopamine is gonna drop. It's gonna drop, and you're gonna feel withdrawal symptoms. You're gonna feel angry, depressed, anxious, because this thing that was giving you tons and tons and tons of dopamine without you actually working for any of it, you know, it's just gone like that. So your mind needs to replenish that dopamine. It needs to bring that dopamine back, right? And dopamine is a very expensive resource. It takes time to regenerate dopamine, right? Regenerate the healthy level of dopamine. So for the first few days, you're gonna feel angry, depressed, and anxious, and all those things. You're gonna feel terrible. Maybe you won't be able to sleep. You keep thinking, oh, who messaged me? Well, what if someone important messaged me something? Like all those thoughts will be going through your head, and you're gonna have all this, you know, fear of missing out, and it's gonna be really, really hard. But the thing is, and this is actually something you said, is trying to achieve that healthy dopamine feels way harder. But here's the thing, it does feel way harder, but for a short period of time, for a very temporary period of time. How long? Most of the time, 2 weeks. 2 weeks, that's all it takes. 2 weeks of pain. And after you get through that, you know, the sun starts to come out, our baseline level of dopamine begins to go back to normal. It returns back to normal. Your brain keeps bringing you back dopamine, dopamine, and dopamine, right? After that, after those 2 weeks, like at week 3, you're gonna feel way better, and you're gonna be so glad that you quit social media, for example, right? You can replace social media with any bad habit or any addiction you have. And then your baseline level of dopamine increases like week 4 or week 5. If you stop doing that thing, your brain keeps producing this dopamine and dopamine that your baseline increases, right? So the first thing I would say is dopamine fasts. To stop doing, if it's your phone, like you're saying here, stop using your phone for 30 days. Challenge yourself. I know it's hard, but it's just gonna be hard in the beginning. That's the thing. You can either do short-term pain and long-term pleasure, or short-term pleasure and long-term pain. It's that simple, right? Like dopamine works like a seesaw, right? Like you have pain and then pleasure here, or like very high pleasure and very low pain, and then it switches all of a sudden where it's like very high pain and very low pleasure. That's how dopamine works, right? So that's the first thing, is taking dopamine fast. Now the second thing I would say is good habits. So filling our day, I don't think it's enough to just cut out the bad habit, because that's already very, very hard. I think we also need to replace that habit with good habits. So because our mind needs to get dopamine from somewhere. That's the thing. We need to get dopamine from somewhere. And it can either get it from bad habits, from bad sources like video games and porn and phone and social media, or it can get it from good habits, like going to the gym and doing yoga and meditating and journaling and working on a business or creating content, or like those good habits, right? So if you struggle with phone addiction, right, just tell yourself, I'm not gonna use my phone for 30 days straight, right? And like I said, it's gonna be very, very painful in the start, but then it's gonna feel, I mean, it's gonna be the best 2 or 3 weeks of your life, right? Because dopamine is so fresh in your mind, and you have all this new dopamine, right? That they're gonna be just the best days of your life, right? And also, the second thing is filling it with good habits. So try meditation. Try meditating, even if it's just for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Try journaling. Try buy a notebook and write down what you think. Write down things that you're grateful for, right? And do that every day. And it doesn't have to be something crazy. Like you can just do like 5 minutes of meditation. You could just write like 1 or 2 or 3 things that you're grateful for, but you have to do every day. Like that's it. Maybe like if you're a woman, do yoga, right? Like yoga is so beneficial for women, right? If you're a man, lift weights, go to the gym, right? Reading books, right? Because this is basically how I quit like every single bad habit I used to have, or every single addiction I used to have, is I just replaced it with a good habit, and I understood that it will be just short-term pain and then long-term pleasure, right? So I replaced, video games with going to the gym. I replaced porn with reading books. I replaced social media with creating content, right? I replaced every bad habit, I replaced it with a good habit. And that's how I made that switch. And that's basically what I learned in my own life, and that's what I learned from other people, right? So to answer your question, how does one regulate dopamine and get it from healthier sources? It's just 2 things. First of all, dopamine fast, so we cut out all those bad habits and we understand that it's gonna be very painful just for a short period of time. And the second thing is we fill our day with all the good habits we can think of. So meditation, journaling, doing yoga, lifting weights, reading books, right? All these things. And if you do that, I promise you, you will be very, very painful in the start, but then they will be the best days of your life. I promise you, right? So it's just what I think. This is just my opinion. At the end of the day, this is just what I learned, and I hope I gave you value in this video and I solved your problem. And as always, we're in this together and we will make it.